Are we rolling already?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So you're back.
Yeah. What are we doing today?
Today we're just running.
I'm very bad in front of the screen, so I'm just gonna look at your face.
So what is what's new, Oli Alexander?
So much. So from the past 6 months.
Yeah. I suppose maybe if we're gonna frame today, we should frame a little bit about what's new and where we're at and where we're going, because some exciting stuff has happened.
Very
some
exciting.
Crazy exciting stuff.
Whew. All right, where to start? I think the thing that changed the most is that we finally left from the stage of being the phase of having a dream to actually being able to see that dream become something, right? So I think since you and I met, so many meetings at Captiville with some good old fashions.
R.I.P. Captiville.
R.I.P. Captiville. Discussing what we wanted Gigsy to become, our objective.
Yeah.
And to finally start seeing it taking shape, basically. I think that's very abstract, right?
Yeah.
So how much should we go into it? Because there's a lot. Let's
just go. I mean, the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that we really realized that we need to address is that we're not an agency.
We're not an agency.
We look like an agency, we smell like an agency, but we're definitely not an agency.
We especially smell like an agency, which is, I think, a good thing. It's something that we maintained. All right, so the whole agency thing is we have been trying to learn. We've been learning and learning and learning and learning. Yeah. We've been learning now for over 3 years, trying to figure out how the world of content production works.
Yeah.
And finally, we have enough data collected that we've been able to create platforms and create systems that make the entire process so much smoother, so much less frustration, so much easier to manage, just way more optimized, way more efficient. People are way less frustrated in the process. And so we've been generating efficiency. We've been optimizing the agency model. And now we're finally jumping to the other side and trying to figure out now how to generate scale to that.
Which is interesting because you and I always talk about, and we've always had the conversation around scale. And I think that just as like a general note, we should let folks know, as of a couple of weeks ago, we got accepted into the Idea Village Idea X Accelerator, which Idea Village being the sort of legacy entrepreneurial hub of the city. They've gone through a bunch of transition in the last year. They have new leadership with John Atkinson and his crack team of folks that they've come in with a really different mindset about what entrepreneurship is. Different, good. Different, informed by folks who are really ready to bring the city to the next stage in terms of what entrepreneurship is. So to be concrete about that, Idea Village has always been a fantastic organization. At the beginning, it felt like it was very much an organization that was laying a lot of the groundwork, right? In the 10, 12 years post-Katrina, it has done a fantastic job at that. And it just feels so natural that now the transition of laying the groundwork now goes into one where Idea Village is starting to really focus on scale in the way that scale is talked about in other major metros. So scale through integration of tech to what you do, scale through going and seeking different types of capital, be that equity-based, debt-based, venture capital, things like this, which to us is really funny because we've always had the conversation as if this thing would happen, but now it feels very weird because it's kind of here.
Yeah, and I think that's for me the most interesting piece, for the past few years, every time we're talking to anyone in our organization as we're managing pre-production or production or post-production or sales or accounts management or whatever it is, always half of our brain is, okay, how can we manage this situation? And the other half of our brains is always on, all right, let's take notes so that we can create procedures around this, so we can better this process, so we can somehow automate whatever can be automated here to increase efficiency and so on and so forth. But it's always been, not for us two, but for the other 8 of us, it's always been this abstract concept of like, what are you guys doing and what is this system and what are you talking about? And so to see something finally coming out of the ether, it's really cool. And I had a meeting yesterday with Julian that I've been to talk to you about. So it seems that in 2 weeks from now, we'll have the first,
which will be like
module
last
piece.
week of February.
So the 18th of February
Second last, okay.
is when we're hoping that theoretically we'll have just a piece of this platform, the system, to start running in the organization and start like a beta version to start iterating. So we're going to do it modularly, and so I have a ton to tell you about.
I'm super excited about this. Can you tell us a little bit more about? I'll kind of fill in the pre-story, and then I want to hear more about this back end, because we've always talked about us operating like a logistics company, us thinking very nuts and bolts, process-oriented, step-by-step, on the understanding that we could take something ultra abstract and ultra hard to buy, because there are no set rules for how much does this cost, what is the licensing like, what's my turnaround time, and we could start to become just the clearinghouse of not only quality, but quality and price and process. So we've really been grinding, figuring that out, but now we actually have something in existence. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is, just what it is and what it does for us?
Definitely. So very, very high level speaking, it is 4 things, okay? We call it the systems.
The systems.
Right? Very matrixy, the systems. But
we need to look a less terrifying name,
yeah,
right?
The systems.
It sounds horrifying.
But basically the systems encapsulate 4 things. One is a digital platform. Now, a digital platform that I'll go into in just a second what it is, can only work if you have the right people behind and in front of it, right? So the other piece is obviously figuring out how to hire correctly, how to manage correctly, how to train correctly, how to retain, how to make everyone happy. So that's the second piece. And then obviously all the tools, so figuring out what tools you have to have in-house to make production as efficient and optimized as possible. And those tools, so the cameras you're using, the computers you're using, the servers you're using, the network, everything, how those connect to the digital platform, that's the third piece. And then the fourth piece is just a very thick training module, because we've been obsessed about capacitating, about training folks. Folks shoot photography and videography and edit those things and pre-produce those things, but it's not obvious. You don't learn all of these things comprehensively in school either. So we have a very thick training piece. So these 4 things together are what we call the systems, and basically what they are is the most optimized and efficient way to produce content with the utmost quality at the fastest speed at the lowest price. So the digital platform caters to this entire workflow, right? We start with the sales pipeline. We eventually, when the leads start coming in, and those convert, that has to flow very nicely to pre-production, which has to flow very nicely to production, to shooting, and then to post-production, to delivery, and then to client satisfaction. And, all of this has been very manual and is very manual, usually industry-wise.
And also the reason why people don't tend to scale, they don't scale agencies in the way that we are doing it, is because they're thinking they might have the processes, but they're not trying to go to their clients and say, let's do more smaller stuff for you. they tend to be saying the opposite. They tend to be saying, let's go to you and do more enormous things. Let's pitch you on this huge dream.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that has been 100% your part, right? Like guiding clients into understanding what they actually need in 2018, 2019, right? In this day and age, how other organizations or your clients or whomever are consuming your content, and so which type of content you can make, and how can you make the greatest amount of content that fits your budget. That's a whole science that goes there.
Yeah.
With that. But yeah, I totally agree. But I think the scalability piece, which is so interesting, again, going back to Idea X, we initially didn't get selected. And then last minute, they're like, we have a gut feeling that maybe we didn't understand Gigsy to its fullest. Like, let's have another meeting. We had another meeting. And last minute, like literally at 6 p.m. the day before the program started, they told us to wipe our agendas for the next 2 days because we were in the program.
Yeah.
And that was really cool because it showed us how hard it is to even explain or to even operate content creation that is so customized. We're not doing anything cookie cutter. We're doing something so customized.
It's mass customization.
Mass customization in scale. And basically the focus here is how do you focus on processes? How do you focus on staff?
Yeah.
How do you focus on those things and how those pieces are generating content to, as big of a number as you need of clients?
Well, it's fascinating because it's like we spent a couple years just figuring out. It's like this giant drop of IKEA furniture landed on our front doorstep. But it's even worse than that. It's like it was a scavenger hunt just to find the pieces of IKEA furniture. And then there was no instructions on which piece went to what piece or how to put the things together. And it's funny because it's very much like the last couple of years have been spent trying to find the pieces of the puzzle and then start to piece the puzzle together.
Yeah. It's
really, when we talk about this system, it's funny to think about it because it's the infrastructure. It's the stuff that clients are actually never going to see.
Very little of it.
And that's the crazier thing. 2 years to build something that clients are never going to see. Because this back-end system, this back-end logic is really how we've laid out the plant. It's how we've had everything talk to everything else and how we've done the division. It's the blueprints. You've been the architect. What's interesting is looking at the opportunities now about building that client-facing platform, because I've learned so much, and really through a lot of the initial Idea X conversations about what they mean when they say scale. Like one of the gentlemen who was in there during the teaching, Brett Durrett, who is a Silicon Valley CEO, fantastic guy, super fascinating, like the most empathic engineer you'll ever meet, and really has a lot to say, very thoughtful. When he's talking about scale, he's talking about how do you take a company from 100 million to 2 billion, which I think that I definitely had the experience. I don't know if you did. We had spent so much time in the trenches that we started with this idea that it'd be great to grow a $10, $100 million company, but it becomes so far removed from your schema or your reality that you don't know how to see the thing. So, I mean, the credit to the folks at the Idea Village who really curated fantastic folks coming through.
That was amazing.
Because just the value of having somebody sit there and explain to you, no, here's what it looks like and sounds like. It makes all the difference, because otherwise you're just kind of sitting in the room and nobody's done it.
Yeah.
But that got me recently to start looking at market a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So initially I was looking at some data on the advertising market from the SBDC. And it's about a $60 billion market in the US. Not huge, not mega. I mean, 60 billion is a big market. If you look at the creative services within that market, it's about $12 billion of that market, creative services. So my gut reaction was, okay, we probably fit somewhere in there. somewhere in the ecosystem of what advertisers and marketers are making. But then I did a big sit-down analysis of our clients and who's hiring us and what are the relationships that we have with these folks. And out of our top 50 clients, 90% of them are businesses. They're not agencies at all. So it's like, what? I was looking at the wrong markets. I'm thinking, like, what the heck? What somebody's paying us. Like, somebody thinks that there's value to the services that we're rendering, and we're growing. We're getting great recommendations. What is our market? And I think I showed you this document more recently. Was the growth of the digital advertising, the digital spend ecosystem, which is a $130 billion market, and is doing this insane growth, has been over the last few years, and we've just hit that transition point just in 2018 as of last year where ad spend is now going predominantly to digital as opposed to traditional forms of media. It's really, it can't be emphasized enough that from the consumer standpoint, we have a back-end architecture that we can put something on it that serves a client that is not being served at all.
Yeah.
Is not being served at all, because we know our clients, we know the folks that are coming to us, we know their problems, we know the things that they need. And so that platform, that next step that we build, it's kind of scary to think about it, but it legitimately has the opportunity to build us into one of those mega companies.
No, it really does. And obviously when that happens, if that happens, it's just going to be a crazy set of other challenges. But for me, I think the most important piece for me is, and hearing you talk about all these numbers and the sizes of the industries and so on and so forth. In the most simple form, every or almost every business or every organization that I know requires some type of photographic or videographic content. Even if you have one client and you don't need to do external marketing, you're still going to need to do internal marketing to your staff or whatever.
Yeah.
We all need to produce photo and video content, and it has to happen continuously in this day and age. So, being able to creating an organization that is focused on making this process crazy easy, very inexpensive, and very efficient and fast is mind-blowing. On the other hand, and I think this is something that we talk about often, and definitely is one of my greatest motivations. It's I think what wakes me up every morning is seeing what we're doing, what the platform is permitting to do, or what scale potentially can do to the other side, to the providers. So here we're offering opportunity for folks who. Some folks have never done any sort of photo or video treatment design. They've never shot photo and video professionally. They've never edited photo or video professionally. Bringing them in the organization and training them and hiring them purely due to motivation because they want to do this. But there's so many still entry to barriers.
That's that fourth piece you were talking about, the training piece?
Exactly. And capacitating someone really quickly in a matter of a couple of months how to be a professional, fully proficient in doing these tasks, and giving them the opportunity to become a photographer, to become a videographer, to become an editor, whatever they want. I think that's really exciting because you have so many people out there that would like to be doing this but can't access this because of the time that it takes to build network, build portfolio, build a business out of it.
And you have to do everything.
And you have to do sales, you have to do marketing, you have to do this, and you have to do client management. When you just want to shoot, or you just want to edit, or you just want to plan, and Gigsy right now can offer this to 8 people, and plus some apprentices that we bring every now and then. But hopefully, when we're able to flip the switch in 5 minutes, we'll be able to create this opportunity to hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people all around the US, maybe all around the globe, and that's really exciting. I think that's and so doing this and at the same time catering to a very to something that every organization needs. Yeah, that's a cool balance.
And nobody's doing it well. I heard it today in a conversation with a client where we were talking about a big video project they wanted to work on. And so I gave them our menu of services. I gave them the rate card. I broke down exactly the way that it would work. I priced out, literally sitting in the meeting, just using our production plan. I said, let's do it together and get an idea what it will actually look like. Because she goes, I don't know my budget, but if I could get an idea, I'd be able to work with it. I go, okay, let's map it out. And it's crazy just like sitting there and thinking that we've built all this stuff over the last couple of years, and just how it's this wild recursive function between going out to clients and saying what's important, what is the thing that you need, how do we make it as easy as possible for you to understand so that you have the best experience, and then going back to the production ecosystem and saying what's the easiest way that we can generate this that gives us the highest quality, that makes sure that everything is spot on. It's wild to see that happen, and then you start to see these other little ancillary things happen.
Yeah.
So we're having the conversation, and they go, well, let's do the video stuff. We're going to do some of the promo stuff, and then we're going to do some of the day of. I kind of map out what the price would look like for them. They're like, okay, that's cool. And one of the other people in the meeting was like, oh, I think we have a connection on photography. And right there, the person who was leading the conversation goes, yeah, but I would just rather stay with one company.
It's easier.
It's so intuitive.
Yeah.
It's so intuitive because the need is there. And you solve 1,000 other problems by solving one big problem and just kind of hacking at it. And the funny thing is that I don't think that either of us knew, especially at the early stage, you just don't know how small you have to go to make something big.
And I think that for me is so key.
It's crazy.
From regarding something that I've learned about being an entrepreneur. And I think it's one of the things that you and I, when we pop a beer open.
We're at 20 minutes, that means I have to put my hair up.
It's something that we discuss, right? It's you have to go so deep into the weeds, and then all of a sudden you flip a switch, and in the same day, just from one moment to the other, and you have to be crazy high level and cater to the growth of your company, and then all of a sudden you have to go in the weeds, and then you have to become a fire person and like put out fires and so on and so forth, and it's hard, and then you get home and you're exhausted, and you wake up in the next morning, and that kind of just repeats. And if you don't have and I think that for me has been, for me personally, I don't know how this would have been ever possible without a business partner.
Yeah.
First and foremost, because we remind each other of what our north is, of what our focus is, of what we like and what we don't like, and why we're in this in the first place, and so on and so forth. But the motivation piece is such a challenge. I think it's challenging for human beings in general, for every job, for everything. But being an entrepreneur and having just to jump from one thing to the other and flip these switches all the time, and then waking up in the morning and finding the motivation, both in problem solving the daily problems and growing the thing based on your big vision, that for me has been really, I think, one of the greatest learning, one of the greatest quotes.
So stinking hard to learn.
Yeah.
It's like you have to master yourself in an entirely different way. And then it hits you at weird times when you wouldn't expect it.
Yeah.
Like the beginning of this year. I hated the beginning of this year.
The beginning of this year was hard.
I was so bummed for like
hard.
2.5, 3 weeks.
And it's crazy because we ended the last year so freaking well. We doubled the company, the growth of the company. Like we were on such a high note. Everyone was happy. We completed all of our production. We were able to give everyone
a couple weeks off.
11 or 12 days off, close the company to start fresh. And we start fresh, and everyone is indeed rested and fresh, but we're kind of depressed.
Yeah.
It was hard to put a finger on like what's going on.
Do you know what I think it is? I think it's that we did it.
We did that one thing, yeah.
Yeah, like we did it, and then we kind of looked around, and we'd run the numbers, and we participate. We just finished the Goldman Sachs program. We cleaned house with all the productions. We doubled gross revenues again. And then we sat down at the beginning of January, and I was like, what the hell am I supposed to do next?
And this has happened a few times.
It's so hard because it's like, what do I, it's so hard.
Intrapreneurship 101. There is no such thing. Impossible. There is no such thing because of these topics that we're talking about, right? These very, so, we go into the idea X, or the Goldman Sachs program, or another accelerator that I knew in Brazil or Endeavor, that just many different, or you go to business school, or you go to entrepreneurship school, you go to BAPS, whatever it is, the conversation is always you're always going to have patterns, right? You're going to talk about marketing. You're going to talk about business modeling. You're going to talk about the numbers. You're going to talk about hiring and HR and those things. But what I haven't yet been part of, like a discussion that for me as an entrepreneur would have been the richest, is how to keep yourself motivated.
Yeah.
How to keep yourself sane.
Yeah.
How to, find balance. And just how not to do stupid shit, because
like what?
I do stupid shit all the time, and then I look back and I'm like, you can't do that as the entrepreneur. You could do that if you were, in any other position, but you can't do that when you get too stressed. And then to one of your staff members, you say something or whatever, and you're like, that was just so stupid. Like something personal, something about like how you're having a hard time. Because you don't realize at that moment that weakness of yours that you just very clearly illustrated because you're struggling or whatever in that specific moment, you didn't realize if that is going to somehow impact the performance of that
somebody else
member or their view of how the company is being led. And then there's this whole cultural aspect of it that we're exploring, that we're figuring out. And that is it has so many variables to it. It's so hard, right? Company culture. That was the most boring classes that I had in school. And yet here I find them to be probably the most important things to apply.
It's hard because especially with especially a young and entrepreneurial company, it's like if we were 30 years in the game and we knew everything that we were talking about, yeah, cool. Like you can do the corporate, professional, personal, very clean distinction, but this is the weirdest triathlon ever.
It's the weirdest.
Like it's so multi-sport. It's so full contact in all ways. And one thing that I think feels really good about the ecosystem now is that I think that the thing I love about our team is that our team simultaneously knows that we don't know everything.
Yeah.
But they also know that we're enough of
they trust us.
They know that we're crazy enough to actually go and like invest the time and figure it out, and we'll invest in supporting them. And
they trust us. I think too that's something important.
At least I hope y'all are sitting here. That would.
But yeah, I feel that we have. I mean, we've stabilized, and that's a feat. I think that's something that sometimes we haven't really talked about it that much, but we have stabilized. We have a very stable, beautiful team that gets along very well together for a good chunk of time now. Yeah. Things haven't really changed, and it's just so we've only seen now growth with how the team's feeling, the morale, the team's technical skills, the team's soft skills, and so on and so forth. But, we went through iterations. And while we were going through iterations, we thought it was never going to end and we were never going to. But now we have such a solid team. But it's super cool because of what you're saying, right? Now you have a super cool team, but they're not just working, they trust, again, hopefully, right? That even though they see us grinding, even though they see that we're actually humans and that we make right and wrong decisions, they trust us. And they know that we're on the same team. They know that we are not trying to take advantage.
Pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to get to the same place. That has been very cool, very refreshing, I think, anyways.
It's hard. It's so hard to do. You couple that with, I know that I've spent in the last, outside of the team stuff, more of just the personal stuff, trying to refine a system of both motivation and self-care.
Yeah.
I don't think until about 8 months ago I started getting really serious about it.
You've been self-caring so well and balanced, and it's been a source of motivation.
Oh, cool.
I mean, B doesn't
glad
know
it
yet,
works.
but I'm taking her. Her birthday is Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I'm taking her in the morning to do yoga. 6:30 in the morning. Now that's a Rob time.
Yeah.
6:30 in the morning to do yoga, as per our conversation with Chelsea the other
A little
day.
Bikram action.
Then she's gonna do massage, and like we're just trying to implement and eating the right stuff, and creating boundaries, sleeping well at night, and going out and having fun. That's stuff we forget.
It's
and it
hard
takes a
because
while
you
to
can't. It's
remember.
easy to shut it down.
Yeah.
It's really easy to shut it down. It's
yeah.
easy to like lock yourself in a box. But you can't, man. And I was struggling with this a couple of days ago, because it is true that if you can sit and you can work. There was like the cult of the 1,000-hour work week. I'm just going to be working, and people really think that there's virtue in that, and I just think it's patently untrue, because there's such a serious point of diminishing returns, where you have. If life is a constellation of things that form you, work, if it is taking up more than 80%, like you're doing it wrong, man.
Yeah.
And if your work is your passion and something that gives you life, well, that's awesome, but it still shouldn't be 80%. And
I'm so pet peeve when people say like, work smart, not hard. I think it's so, yeah, great. Like, it's so easy for you to say this. So insanely hard to actually apply it. But it's true.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you're saying. Like, dude, if you're working 16-hour days every day or whatever, 13-hour days every day, I don't know. I agree with you.
If you're an
I don't know if
entrepreneur,
doing the
you
right
need
thing.
to work dumb. That's what I
Well,
think.
yeah.
You need to work dumb.
and then work smart, but then work back dumb.
Yeah.
It's a crazy but it's no
Well, it's
sense
true. It's like,
whatsoever, yeah.
I tell you, a week and a half ago, I was sitting with one of the top event planners in the city, and I'm sitting with him asking for his advice on some of these assets, some of these design assets that we produce, because I'm trying to learn a little bit more about, can we work in the event space world? Can we work in the events world? Can we work in the corporate events world? Can we work in the hospitality world? And he's looking through the thing, and I'm hearing myself asking him questions, and I'm thinking to myself, I sound like a fourth grader. Like I do. Like I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, how does that work? Like, why does that thing happen? But then you realize, as an entrepreneur, you must ask these questions, because 99.9% of people walk around the world and you go, I'm an event planner. And then once you say that, they immediately assume that they know exactly what your day-to-day life is. They go, well, you walk up to somebody else, you go, well, what do you do? I'm a firefighter. And 99.9% of people automatically assume that they have a vision of what you do. But in truth, there are so many tiny little things that people have put immense amount of effort and thought into, that make up that ecosystem. And if you don't ask the stupid questions, you just think that the firefighter is the dude holding the hose, standing in front of the blazing building, and it's so much more than that.
So right.
But we do it just to be able to move around the world and not have data overload every 15 seconds.
Data overload. Yeah, man. I couldn't agree more. But I think for me, at the end of the day, and something that I try to, I try to talk to our folks here at Gigsy, to our staff members here at Gigsy, is at the end of the day, whatever it is you're doing, enjoy the trip. Try to enjoy the trip, and I like having that philosophy as a high-level philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy the ride, because, and again, cliche as heck, but say you're working 7 hours a day. Say you're working 14 hours a day. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Because what matters is if you enjoyed your 14 hours, by all means, do the 14-hour thing. To each their own. Like we met some entrepreneurs at IDIX,
Yeah.
and I was in the table with them, talking to them, and they were telling me that they sleep no more than 4 hours a night, and usually they go to bed at about 1 a.m. They wake up at around 5.
I hate everything about that.
And at first I admired them a lot, I still do, but it was making me so anxious, because I'm like, shit, I don't do that. It's very important that I have my 8 hours of sleep every night, and if I don't, I will get cranky.
Yeah.
And it's hard to uncranky me. And nowadays, like, I realize, okay, maybe sometimes I have to work 6 days a week.
Yeah.
But man, if I do the 7-day a week and then start back on Monday, that is so unproductive, like what we're saying. So that doesn't work for me, but it works for them. And what I told them is, my man, as long as you're enjoying the trip, as long as this is, this is the thing that you want to spend your time with. It's just that I love hanging out with my wife and my dog. I just like it too much, So for me, like, part of enjoying the trip of my life,
it's a well-balanced diet,
is at some point in the day, make out with my dog and my wife. But yeah.
What is it it's interesting to see some of the Silicon Valley vibe come to New Orleans. And I was definitely,
that was great, yeah.
at the beginning of it, saw, like, you're talking about these things like the what's it called, like the Uberman sleep schedule, where you do only a certain number of hours, like this, like, very hardcore, at least my attribution for that is, like, it's a very sort of like West Coast, like, startup-y vibe. Like, I was kind of freaked out meeting some of the people in Idea X, because they were like, oh yeah, first I worked for this startup, then I worked for this startup, and then I did this. And I was kind of like, how many startups did you, what? It's its own little scene.
It's really cool.
And on one hand, I was really excited to see that kind of, that ethos was informing the city, but it made me nervous for something different. It made me nervous that, I don't know, I've always looked at New Orleans. New Orleans has always been a city where there were hustles.
Yeah.
There's always been hustles in the city. Everyone is always hustling, and if you just rename it, it's entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Like, it's what it is.
It is, yeah.
But it's not necessarily startup. Like, what they articulated to us was that the distinction between startup and small business is the way that you're trying to scale, or the ways in which you, And so to me, I think, what is the happy sum of that? Like, where does the New Orleans hustle culture get to inform the kind of West Coast startup culture, instead of one just eating the other? I would hate for one to eat the other.
That's such a cool topic. And obviously I don't know. I have no clue, honestly, because who am I? But I find it so fascinating because I think we're in the sauce right now. Like, we're in the, like, it's happening.
Yeah.
This is the time that it's happening, right? Well, even like how many folks were from the West Coast?
And moved, yeah.
Like, in our program. So we're seeing it happen. It's happening. And I think it's even more than just the culture of hustling, or versus the
mega
West,
scaling.
Yeah. I think it's also, it's many aspects. Like, New Orleans is so endemic from a cultural perspective, right? It's so its own thing amongst 50 other states. Like, it's so its own thing. And what's going to happen 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Because of all this investment, or everything that's happening right now, all this investment in new ventures and accelerating new ventures and bringing in different business mindsets and different types of businesses to how is that going to affect New Orleans 10, 20 years from now?
Yeah.
I have no clue. I'm not even from here. I've only been here for 3 years or so. And still I'm still figuring it out. It still overwhelms me, like how different all its minutia, New Orleans is. And but one thing I do know, like, there's an energy here, and this energy ends up sticking on you. And it's a good thing, I feel, because, it's very hard for you to sustain a mindset, this workflow mindset from the West Coast, for example. When things are moving at a different pace, and when people's motivation, people's incentives are different. Yeah. People are so passionate about music here. They're so passionate about the culture here. And then you have Mardi Gras coming, and they're so passionate about the cruise and so on and so forth.
Folks are more concerned with the quality of life than the quantity of their life.
And so will that change, or will that predominate and create its own endemic and like
how does it
way of
inform
approaching
the soup?
Business? Yeah. But it's cool. It's cool to see it happening. It's interesting. If anything, it's interesting to see it happen. And I've seen something similar happening, or it is happening right now, something similar in Brazil. So
really?
Yeah.
What's happening in Brazil?
this topic, right? Like something like this, where you have a globalized first world country idea of how business is and the business ecosystem should be.
Yeah.
And a third world country that is, in high development, trying to insert that, but in its own way, right? Because then things get shifted in translation, right? And across barriers. But then, obviously, going a step further, Brazil is going through a whole series of interesting
big political shifts,
and it all. People have whatever opinions they want about politics, and definitely I'm not the one who's going to talk about politics. But what I find interesting, and I'm going to get so smashed if any of my Brazilian friends, sees me getting into this topic, because it's a very sensitive topic. But it's really cool to see politicians our age, getting it, starting to gain power into the political ecosystem in Brazil, and acting completely different than the corrupt mindset that we've had historically in Brazil, in politics. And, it's a completely different approach. It's a much more globalized approach. It's a much more...
Are these young folks who are born or raised in Brazil, go to a university somewhere and then come back to Brazil? What is it that, is it culture that they consume that gives them a different mindset? What is it?
I have no numbers on me, but I'm just assuming that the greatest majority of Brazilians, stay in study in the country.
Sure.
They don't, even though the greatest concentration of Brazilians in the U.S. is in Boston. I think probably because of the universities. So you have a small percentage of Brazilians that leave the country to study abroad. But, there's some really good schools there. I don't think they're bringing in the mindset because they're going abroad.
Yeah.
I think they're bringing in the mindset because it's inevitable, because it's globalization, because it's everywhere, right? Because you consume it in movies, right? You consume it in media. Everyone's connected via the internet, and even in schools, I studied in a Brazilian business university. And a ton of cases that I studied were from Harvard or from MIT, and translated to Portuguese. So and this is not obviously only happening in Brazil, it's happening all over the world.
Yeah.
And so, but it connects, I think it connects really well to New Orleans, because a very similar thing is happening to New Orleans.
Domestically,
you have this really beautiful, deeply rooted culture that's, you have this other culture of how we do business.
Coming from all over. We've got a huge East Coast population, a huge West Coast population. The Midwesterners are discovering that winter's not so bad down here.
And look what's Chicago, Brazil, Maryland, New Orleans. And so it's I think this is interesting. If you look around, it's so mixed right now. Even in our organization.
We're a port city, too. That's the thing, is New Orleans has always been the place for comings and goings. Historically, it's always been a place to go.
Something interesting has happened to me.
What's that?
With that I've currently realized. When I first moved to New Orleans, after the first 3 months that you're so enamored by how, things are here, which is so cool. But after that initial phase, both my wife and I, we felt like we weren't being accepted. And which gives a feeling of I don't belong here.
Yeah.
People are not opening themselves up to us.
Yeah.
They open themselves from a superficial way, but then once you cross a certain threshold, that's kind of closed. What I'm seeing 3 years in is people that, just in general, that were not open to us or our ways or whatever, are now very open. And it's kind of and my hypothesis around this is you've been here long enough. You cross 3 years. Okay, that might be long enough for us to not think that you're going to leave, so that, we can open ourselves to you. And
do you think you changed over that time?
Of course. Most definitely.
I've definitely felt that at the beginning.
I definitely changed, but I also think that I'm definitely more accepted because people are seeing my face for years. And I've seen this with my neighbors in my street, okay, you've passed the test of time, and okay, now I think we can we can give ourselves, like we can open ourselves to you and we can invest in you.
You're not a flight risk anymore.
Because you're not a flight risk anymore, you know? And that has been interesting. And you know, like, you know, so I think my sister lived in Paris for 6 years, and something very similar happened in Paris. And we lived in New York for a while. Also, New York has a similar thing. São Paulo has a similar thing. And I think when you live in a city that's so dynamic, and it's so, especially Paris, right? Like this pull of people, just this influx of people coming because it's such a romantic place, it's such a magical place, but coming for 6 months, coming for a year, and then leaving because it's a very hard place to leave. Like, why are you, Parisian, going to open yourself to that? You know? So anyways, I digress. But
it's a kind of cultural heartbreak.
It's right?
Right? You don't want to fall in love with somebody who's going to disappear.
Who's going to disappear, yeah.
It's summer camp vibes. You might have your little summer camp tryst, but
it's just summer camp.
But it's summer camp.
Don't try to.
You can't cross the barrier, like you say.
I did that once, and it didn't work well, and I got super heartbroken. I went to summer camp when I was 14, and I met this beautiful lady, and we had a summer camp thing for 2 months.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, next year I tried to reach out because she was American, I was Brazilian.
Aww.
And so I came to visit my sister at BU. She used to study at Boston University. I came to visit my sister, and I reached out to her, and she's like, sorry, bro.
It's not the same.
That was only summer camp. You know? I was in Switzerland. Like,
I have a wild summer camp story.
Ooh, we're going to get into wild.
Growing up in the north suburbs of Chicago, thank you, Mia. I mentioned it again in this episode. I went to summer camp in Wisconsin. It was like a Jewish summer camp called Camp Shy. And I went there for like 3 summers. I absolutely loved it. You go for a month at a time. And the first summer, there was a girl who, maybe it was the second summer, who I had a huge crush on. And her twin brother was in my cabin, David Elster. And her name was Roxanne Elster, or Roxy Elster. And she was just the most beautiful person to a sixth grader at the time. I was infatuated. I was ruined. And then that was it. Summer camp came and went. And I was in 6th grade. I wasn't going to go, like, I don't know, like, you know, I wasn't like smoking cigarettes, like sneaking away in summer camp. Like, it was a Jewish summer camp, like not that hardcore.
Did you pray every morning?
No, it was like the Reform summer camp. So we got to go mountain biking and stuff, but not on Shabbat. And then so I'd kind of forgotten about it, right? Like Roxy and David, and they were twins, and I had a huge crush on her, and he was in my summer camp. And then when I was 26, so like 15 years or whatever, I don't know how old a 6th grader is, I did the birthright trip.
Oh, yeah.
And I did it specifically with people from like the suburbs of Chicago because I figured like that's probably more...
Makes more sense.
Yeah, it makes more sense because they just didn't have a group, you know, a New Orleans group. So I did it, and there were 2 buses, and I was on the bus 314, and the other bus, which was 3 something, I don't know, who was there, but some girl, and you'd get to a site, and then the other bus would come up, and you'd see some of the people, and you'd be like, well, this is our group, like, look how connected we are. And they'd look at you and kind of think the same, and you'd kind of be checking each other out, but you didn't really get to know each other. You weren't doing too much programming. And like the second or third time, I thought I recognized this girl. Like, who is she's like a super cute girl, like black haired. And I was like, we finally got to one of the spots in Tel Aviv, and I was like, are you Roxanne Elster? She's like, yep. And so I bumped into her like years after.
Shabab.
Yeah. I mean, I had a crush on her in 6th grade. She's still absolutely beautiful now.
I like that story.
But wild. There's nothing in the world that's one of these things that's too weird to not be serendipity, you know?
Yeah, I can't tell my stories, my summer camp stories. My wife's probably going to watch this episode, and it's just going to be
You're going to get
disaster.
in trouble. We'll let the Roxy Elster stand. But it's weird because you see somebody and you're like, hey, how have the last 15 years been? You seem well. Where do you start? Like, what's the starting point? Man, and that person has lived a whole life. She had in that time she had gotten and beaten cancer. And was just like the most glowing, wonderful, still is the most glowing and wonderful human being.
Yeah, that's...
And so you're like, how's the last 15 years? Well, I left summer camp and continued to be in 7th grade and 8th grade and then had this absolutely crushing news and went through this entire experience and then came through it, and now here I am in Israel. It's too wild. Life is just too wild in that way. And I'm sure there's a million other little examples of it, right?
Yeah, I love that. Oh, I like that.
I have a good topic for us to end on.
Shoot.
Which is and it ties in nicely with this story, is that I think that this whole thing is like learning how to surf, but you got to get the wave going. Like these little moments of serendipity that we've spent so much time just grinding and trying to like slosh the water in the wave pool so we could get a nice little crest, and we could try to get our boogie board up underneath there and get a little, and you're just grinding, you're doing it. And I just probably have a water example in the mind because I've been swimming at the gym, and it is awful. It's just hard, but it's great. I absolutely love it. It's just really hard. Like you have to be efficient, and you can't breathe, and your legs burn. And if you do it the efficient way, everything hurts more, but you go faster.
Yeah, but you're gonna be hot, man. Like it's good, you know. Like,
I'm getting my what do they call it? Your beach body. That's what they call it.
Beach body. Summer body, man.
But that's what it's like. It's like it's like surfing, but you got to get the wave started. And the hardest thing is like you're just like kicking, and you're just looking for these little moments of serendipity to make reason out of what it is that you're trying to do. And you get to a certain point and you get like a little lull, and you're like, this sucks. I put in so much effort. I've been grinding, and I got like this little baby wave pool. Like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely stupid. But then on the other side, you're like, well, that's pretty cool. I got a wave going. And as long as you can, like you say, just keep locked into this idea that like, well, I got a wave going. This is my wave, so let's just keep rocking it. It starts to build on itself.
Oh, I love the visuals that you created in my mind.
And then you see it.
It's exactly that.
Because then you're riding it, and then you don't have to put so much energy into it. Then other people can see the wave.
Yeah, I feel, that this reminds me a lot of these serendipitous moments and then riding the wave. It reminds me a lot of just the concept of leverage, right? And so, 2.5 years ago when you and I first starting working together, it was that, we figured out that if we joined forces, we would leverage each other, and we would be able to create a much larger wave than, the sum of our two waves. That was really cool.
But even that's hard because it's like two dudes on a life raft trying to figure out where to sit.
Two hairy Jews, man. Like that was, and
that was the alternate
name
for Gigsy.
And that was interesting because, we created leverage there, and we used that as much as possible, but it was just us shooting and selling and doing everything together. Little by little, we're building the company. We're bringing in folks. We're training folks. We're hiring. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to fire. You're creating procedures. You're figuring stuff out. And then what you were talking about earlier today of you getting so in the weeds, and then you forget, and then you forget the reason why you're doing this, but then you remember, and then you go high level, and all of these things, and then you bring up the serendipitous moments, right? And I think the serendipitous moments, the cool thing about the serendipitous moments is that they serve to remind us sometimes of our north, or to kind of restructure it, right? I think Idea X, getting into the Idea X after having been rejected, in my mind, that was a serendipitous moment.
I agree.
Because it showed us, okay, we're on the right path, we think so, but at the same time, we're not very good at explaining to investors or, in a pitch, exactly what it is we do and how, even though we've locked sales, we locked how we do it with clients. And then it just forced us to kind of figure out, okay, what is it that we're doing wrong? What is it that we're doing right? And how? But at the end of the day, we need the serendipitous moments, and the only way for them to not the only way, but I feel that serendipitous moments don't usually happen if you're not open for them.
Yeah.
I've been for so long, for the past few years, so in the trenches. I mean, both of us have. That I've enclosed myself. I've cocooned myself just because I'm so overwhelmed by everything else that I'm like, I have to just focus on this. And all of a sudden, serendipitous moments kind of stopped happening. Just magic stopped happening because I was so enclosed and like keeping this engine running, you know, and not even knowing why or, you know, and again, going back to like, one of the amazing things of having an amazing business partner or an amazing wife at home and amazing folks that you're working with and being part of a cool ecosystem is that they remind you of, you know, the things that actually matter and what you're building. And when I finally realized that I had to reopen myself, you know, to life and like get back to living, the serendipitous moments started happening again. I think that's really, for me, it's been a really powerful lesson. You know, yeah, things do. The universe does happen, but if you're closed off,
it's definitely not.
It's definitely not.